Hello, this is PJ Capozzi, Superintendent of Schools for Meridian 223, checking in with our annual levy presentation. In November of each year, we vote on a tentative levy, and we talk about it at our public board meeting. From that information that the board gives me after our discussion, I try to create this presentation so that any member of the public, any member of our faculty or staff can understand the strategy and what we're doing in terms of what we are asking for in terms of taxes. Constructing a levy is a relatively simple, but the state makes it much more complex than it needs to be. So instead of just saying this is the rate we want to charge in terms of our taxes, what we have to do is start with a projection. So our county assessors, and since we're in two counties, in Winnebago and Ogle, get us a projected number, and then based off of that, we say this is what we would want in terms of money, and then we kind of do a backwards calculation to go. As you can see, we have a huge EAV jump this year. It's known as a quadrennial assessment, and this is somewhat typical in all of the districts that I have discussed this with in Ogle County, and many other counties are seeing this. And so there's in every 20-year assessment, you'll see a large jump to EAV. As taxpayers, you will feel this as well. So it puts the district in an interesting position. So the district is typically in a position where we try to capture as much revenue as we can based on the legal limits that are set forward for us in each fund. However, trying to be sensitive to the fact that there's a large assessment increase made our conversation in November really interesting in trying to find the line as to how can we do what's best for the school, but also be mindful of what's best for the taxpayer. Once we have that figure of 191,000 or so that we've gotten from each one, we go through fund by fund. And for the majority of our funds, there's a legal limit as to what we can tax. For other ones, there's no limit. It's just discretionary or based on need that you can demonstrate. And so I'll go through and talk about each fund and the differences and the decisions that were made by the Board of Fund 10 is where we experienced the referendum a handful of years ago, and I would suspect that this year we go start the conversations of putting into works an extension of that referendum. So education is where most of our expenses take place. It's really anything to do with the education of our children, everything from technology to the food they consume to teachers' salaries, anything that deals directly with that. So a few years ago, we went out for referendum. It was 278, and we moved it up to 3.48. So for this year, that is our most important fund. We're going to capture every dollar we can because we always will capture every dollar that we can in education. So this put us in a position to say, if we want to be as fiscally conservative as we can we cut back in any other areas in terms of our ask to the taxpayer so that we don't put as much burden on as we potentially could have. So the next area becomes buildings and grounds. And I've said this for years on this presentation, and anyone that will talk to me, this is our most fundamentally imbalanced fund, meaning that to do our job well in buildings and grounds, we need more money than we can secure solely through the levy process. So that being said, we're going to capture as much as we possibly can in buildings and grounds as well. Bond and interest, this is similar to long-term debt. So this is your mortgage payment, your credit card payments on a personal level. For us, it's all of the things when we do major work, we go out, we bond for it, and this is payback. So whatever we owe automatically comes forward to us. So this year we owe $1.844 million. And this is the highest that we'll owe for several years unless we go back out and do additional work, which I'm sure we'll have to do at some point. So this is an auto levy for us based on what our paperwork says with the state. 140 is transportation. So this is where you'll see us start to try to scale back a little bit. So we could ask for around 390,000 here. We're only going to ask for about 360 simply because this fund is healthy and we're trying to, again, be as considerate to taxpayers as we possibly can. Another one. So we have a little bit of a surplus here. This is not a fund that you need to run a surplus at. So we're kind of intentionally spending it down. So a few years ago, we levied at 420. Last year, we levied at 400,000. This year, we're going to go all the way down to 360. So we're about eating through whatever that surplus or remainder balance is. But again, this is an opportunity for us in a year where there's a big EAV increase to do what we can to bring the tax rate down so there's less of an impact on our Fund 60. We don't. Fund 70, working cash. So another area, we could ask for around $95,000. We're going to ask for about $37,000 instead. Again, taking in what we need to be as efficient and effective as possible, but also being courteous of our taxpayers. As a backdrop to all of this, and this doesn't have anything to do with Fund 70 in particular, it's important to note that we are trying to do what we can to be fiscally conservative, but when the state puts out their formulas for what they think it would take a school district to adequately meet standards with all their kids, which we do a pretty good job at, we are at 68 to 70% every year. So we are 30% below adequacy in funding. So we're trying to do our part to be fiscally conservative, understanding that we still have a long way to go, even in the state's eyes, to get to what's adequate for kids. Risk management, you're going to see a slight uptick here. So we've typically levied $520,000. As you guys may be aware, may not be aware, we've done several security upgrades, including having a school resource officer. So that's where this comes out of. So we've got to kind of gradually increase this funding so that we can continue to do what we can to make sure that our schools are as safe as possible for kids. Fund 90 is fire and safety. Again, it could be about $95,000. We're going to bump that down to $70,000. Lease and rent, we're going to capture the whole thing. This is largely a technology expense. So if we want to continue to move forward in technology, we have to keep spending in lease and rent. Education, same thing. There's a thing called maintenance of effort. This is a regulation from the federal government, which means that we can't spend less on special education than we spent the year before unless we have incredibly detailed justification for it. So in terms of the money we receive for special education, we need to continue putting that into the program. Summary totals, based on an EAV of 191 million, we're going to ask for 11,045,000. That's what we expect to get, and we expect our overall tax rate to be at 5.75. What does that mean for you? We're trying our best to be fiscally conservative. So we asked for the referendum. You can see the big jump between FY15 and FY16. And that was part of what we said is that we're going to do our best to be conservative in terms of what we do in other areas and not continue to jack up the tax rate. That I answered that question, it seems like 50 times at different fireside chats, in people's kitchens, at fire stations. How do we know you're not going to continue just to raise the tax rate, raise the tax rate, raise the tax rate? And all I could do at that point was promise. And so what we've tried to do is show you that we're trying to be as conservative as possible. Now, we need that money in education. Our school district would look fundamentally different if we didn't have that referendum in terms of what we could do to provide services to kids. But everywhere else that we can be conservative, we are. So, as always, I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this 8 minutes of learning about our levy. My phone number is 815-980-0310, and email is pcaposey, PCAPOSEY, @mail.meridian223 if you have any questions. Thank you, and make it a great day.